Force, the successor to the Moto Z Force and the most powerful flagship smartphone in Motorola's arsenal. It brings some new features like a slimmer build and dual rear-facing camera sensors, but it also carries a smaller battery and most of the features available in the original Z Force, like a shatterproof display and Moto mods. This is the Moto Z2 Force box, branded with T-Mobile. This is the T-Mobile variant. If we slide open the box, we'll find the Z2 Force sitting right on top. Motorola was kind enough to send me a T-Mobile SIM card to use to test the Z2 Force. Underneath, we'll find a packet containing some basic get-started paperwork, a lot of stuff that you probably won't ever read. There's a handful of accessories, including a USB-C charging cable and fast charging wall wart. There's also a USB-C to 3.5mm headphone jack adapter included, which is pretty nice to see. But I would have liked to have seen it built into the phone, if you know what I mean. Motorola ripped off the Band-Aid last year when they removed the jack from the Z Force, but it still stings a little bit to see it missing in the successor. Upon removing the plastic wrap, which details some of the features with large, beautiful icons, you'll notice just how similar it is to the original Z Force. So this phone has a very industrial feel to it with the stiff edges, smooth metal backplate, and metallic frame. Its profile has been slimmed down to about 6.1mm thick, so it's extremely thin and extremely light. There's still a big protruding camera sensor that makes me wonder why Motorola didn't just, fill out the rest of the phone with battery and make the rear flush with the camera sensors. But Motorola wants you to use Moto mods with this device. You can slap on a battery mod if you need some extra juice, or attach a mod with a different rear texture to make the phone flush with the cameras. I can see where they're coming from, but personally, I'd like to have a larger battery pre-installed with the option to add even more battery later. Now there is a trackpad built in underneath the display, and it's used to navigate the phone with a series of swipes. If you decide to use this trackpad, you will free up some space otherwise taken up by the on-screen nav buttons. It'll definitely take some time to get used to the different swipes and their functions, but it's a pretty unique option to have. The display itself is a POLED display with a 1440 by 2560 resolution and 534 pixel per inch index. Upon first impressions, it gets very bright, has good viewing angles, and fantastic contrast thanks to the nature of AMOLED panels. This display type helps conserve battery when using features like Moto Display, which is a feature that shows notifications while the screen is turned off. The display itself, it's shatterproof, and that's achieved by using plastic instead of glass. So if you drop it on some gravel, for example, it'll just have some gashes and scuffs, but no cracks because glass isn't being used. The downside of this, there's always pros and cons of design choices, and the downside is that the plastic screen will scratch very easily, and it will pick up micro scratches and the works over time. Android Nougat 7.1 is running on the software side of things with a very minimal skin that runs buttery smooth. If you're looking for a near stock Android experience, you should really enjoy the software. With the Snapdragon 835 chipset and 4GB of RAM, it feels very snappy and responsive. I do wish Motorola would up the amount of RAM given the price of this handset, which we'll discuss more later. But they did not do that, so we're stuck with 4GB of RAM, which I think is plenty, but hey, at least on paper, 6 would have been pretty nice to see. Motorola did something rather unusual with the cameras this time around. On the rear, there are 2 camera sensors, which in and of itself isn't particularly unique, but instead of a telephoto lens, they added a monochrome sensor to capture true black and white images and videos. There's still a depth mode for taking those extra milky depth of field shots, but no wide-angle sensor or no telephoto sensor next to the main 12-megapixel shooter. Battery capacity is only 2730 mAh, and while I haven't tested it in detail, I'm not very optimistic about its abilities. The front-facing speaker is pretty nice and crisp and loud. There's only one of them, so you don't get that stereo sound, but it's still much better than bottom-facing speakers, or God forbid, rear-facing speakers. A lot of the added functionality centers around Moto mods, which are fantastic. I love the idea of just slapping on a mod to the 16-pin connectors on the back. Now, there's a handful of different mods out there. One of the mods Motorola sent me here, it's the Moto 360 camera mod, and it attaches to the back of the phone. But just like some of the other mods, it's very expensive. It's $300 for this 360 camera mod. So when the price of the phone itself is $720 off contract, a price that is, in my opinion, a bit higher than it should be, the Moto mods become more of a tough sell. Now the good news is for a limited time, you do get a free projector when you pre-order from Motorola, and the mods that were released last year still work this year. Those are my initial thoughts of the Moto Z2 Force. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments down below. As always, I'm BoHD from PhoneDeck.com.